What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In the last video, I got the subframe and the steering rack pulled out of the Evo. Still have not found anything that could be causing the problems that I was having. I do have a few new parts to go on to hopefully see if it fixes the issue. For this video, I'm going to be getting the steering rack reinstalled on the subframe. I'll be getting the control arms and then the sway bar also reinstalled on the subframe. I've got new end links and tie rod ends that I'm going to be installing. I'm going to get the whole assembly reinstalled on the Evo, and hopefully if alignment's not too bad, I can take this thing for a test drive. Stay tuned. If you didn't see the last video, definitely go check it out. It will explain everything going on in this video. But I will give you the rundown anyway. I have been chasing a steering or suspension issue for a while now. Basically what happens is when I'm driving, if I'm holding this wheel straight, everything is perfectly fine. When I go to make a right turn, the car almost shifts left or shifts out, and then the alignment is then slightly off. From there, I can make as many right turns as I want. I'll never feel it again, but the moment I go to make a left turn, it does the exact same thing in the opposite direction, and then the exact same thing. I can make as many left turns as I want. It never happens, but the moment I go right, it does it again. I will say the only thing is it does have to be going at least 45 miles an hour. If I'm going just putting around town or putting around the neighborhood, it does not do it. My initial thought was tie rod ends. That's usually always the steering problem issues. However, after more research, I don't think this is what's actually causing it, although they are going to be replaced because they are pretty worn. They're pretty floppy. End links also should not cause that kind of an issue. Even if they were worn, it wouldn't cause that. You would just hear bumping and grinding on these metal pieces. I know that because I had a worn end link on my Focus ST that literally lost the whole bushing. There was nothing. It was just metal on metal. These again are pretty weak. They're pretty floppy, so I did buy new ones to replace those. The next thing that I thought it was going to be are the bushings that actually hold the steering rack to the subframe. For that kind of a shift that I was feeling though, all three would have to be bad. And these things look perfectly fine. They're pretty stiff. I don't feel any kind of movement in there at all. Control arms look good too. Even if these were bad, I don't think these would be what was causing the issues that I was having. You'd hear the clunkiness with the ball joint hitting the metal in there. So again, I don't think that any of this is an issue. You're probably thinking to yourself, dang, that was a lot of work for absolutely nothing. And yes, I agree with you. I could not see these bushings while it was on the car, so I just decided to take everything off. I wanted to inspect everything thoroughly just so that I didn't overlook anything. You did see the last video. I mentioned a couple of other things that I think may be the culprit. Can't test those things out until I get all of this back on the car. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the sway bar, steering rack, control arms back on the subframe. I'm going to get the new end links and tie rod ends installed, and then I will work on getting everything back on the car. Subframe assembly is all back together. It's been a couple of days. The only 2 bolts that I have not put back in yet are these 2 going into this bushing on the lower inner control arm. That is because they require some red Loctite. I only had blue. Aside from that, everything is put back on. The new tie rod ends are on. The new end links are on. No issues at all. These little grease inserts are really nice. I did go ahead and kind of just over grease the joints. Tie rods were exactly the same length. Everything lined up perfectly, so alignment shouldn't be too bad. Before I took the old ones off, 2 things that I do is count the threads on the back of the nut. And the other thing I do is, as I'm spinning this off, I count how many rotations it takes to come all the way off. That way, when you put the new one on, you do the same amount of rotations, and then when you tighten the nut, you just count the threads in the back. Again, no issues at all. These things seem pretty beefy. They are not moving, not budging at all like those old ones are. End links, same thing. These things seem pretty beefy. Everything seems a lot thicker than the old ones were. One thing that was weird, and it's just a part number. The driver's side inserts come pre-inserted on the side right here, whereas the passenger side, you insert them yourself from the back. Steering should definitely be much more responsive now. Torque specs show that all these 12mm bolts get torqued down to 30 foot-pounds. These big boys in the back and the ones that I haven't put in yet, those get torqued down to 81 foot-pounds. I could not find torque specs for all of the bolts that hold the steering rack in. I set the torque wrench to 45 foot-pounds. It definitely seems tight enough. Full assembly is ready to go back in the car now. I've got to get these 2 bolts back in on the lower control arm, like I said, and then I could probably do it myself, but I do have a buddy coming over later to help me get this back in so I can make sure everything is lined up correctly, and then we can get everything bolted back up. Subframe and steering rack are fully reinstalled. First thing that helped out tremendously is having a second set of hands. So big thanks to my buddy Travis for coming over. There's just a lot of things that need to be lined up in different areas. Just helps out to have a second set of eyes. We got the ball joints lined up first. The only things you really have to watch out for is the steering shaft going up and then that little mount for the transmission back there. So as we jacked it up, we just lined the ball joints up on each side, got them locked in. Once I was able to get the steering shaft up through the firewall and get that knuckle connected, I watched from the inside while Travis jacked it up just to make sure nothing was binding inside. From there, we just jacked it all the way up, got all 4 bolts holding the subframe in, got those tightened down, then got the bolt and nut in for the ball joint down here tightened down. You can't see anything from inside here anymore because it's all covered up, but I did line everything up with my little red marker. I took a before picture too just to make sure everything was lined up correctly. New tie rod ends are installed. The nuts are still loose back here. The OEM style uses a locking nut, whereas these Moogs use a castle nut and a cotter pin. I decided to try to get a little fancy over here on this side. Underneath back here, I got the feed and the return lines reconnected for the power steering and the brackets that hold all of them in. Then reinstalled all of the bracing. Did get some new washers for the power steering feed line. The banjo bolt uses a 16mm inner diameter. And the last thing that I did was refill the power steering fluid. I wanted to do a complete flush, so I ordered 2 cans, and it's a good thing that I did. To do the flush, I disconnected the return line right here. I connected it to my vacuum system, thinking everything was going to be fine. Started pouring in the power steering fluid. I never saw it reaching the top. Once I realized I had already put so much in that I should be seeing it, I stopped and I looked over. Usually I can hear fluid dripping, but I guess because it was oil, it wasn't making a sound. And you can still kind of see the shadow there of the puddle that I had. It was just me trying to rush and being an idiot, and when I pulled this off, I never plugged the actual hole. And as I was pouring it in, it was just pouring out the side over there, and somehow I never saw it. I did get the majority of it cleaned up. I had to pull this side plastic over here, get in there and clean all that up. Finally got it plugged off with a piece of tubing and some little clamps. Poured the power steering fluid all the way to the top. Turned my vacuum on. It's not there anymore, obviously. I let it suck it through. I watched it go down. I just kept pouring it in and kept pouring it in, kept topping it off until the vacuum was sucking pure red out. After that, I disconnected it, reconnected everything right here. I let the power steering go just below the return line so that when I pulled this, I didn't have any spilling out. After everything was reconnected, I topped it off again all the way to the top. I actually started the car and let the pump run. That in itself sucked it down some while the car was running. I turned the wheel all the way to the right, all the way to the left. That sucked down a little bit more. I refilled it to the max line here. Again, while the car was running, turned the wheel all the way to the right, all the way to the left. Sucked just a little bit more down. Refilled it one more time all the way to the max line, turned the wheel all the way to the right, all the way to the left, and then it did not move at all. All the air should be out of the system. It seems to be working good. It's up in the air and there's no wheels on it, so it is hard to tell. Now that everything is back on, I can't take it out for a drive just yet. I want to make sure the alignment is somewhat okay. If everything looks good, I may just go ahead and take it for a drive. If not, I'll do what I can to get it back in alignment, and then hopefully I can take it out for a little spin. After a very long 3 days, 3 afternoons, the car is finally aligned. This was probably the biggest pain in the butt of anything else that I've done with this car. Some of it was just me being inexperienced, but there was also a couple of things actually wrong with the car. First thing that I did was adjust the camber on all 4 wheels. The front wheels are what definitely takes the longest. I guess it is possible to get to the camber bolt on the strut back there from underneath the car, but it is tucked in there pretty good. So the easiest way that I found it was just to remove the wheel each time. I do believe that this Evo has aftermarket camber bolts. From my understanding, the OEM bolt is a lot thicker, so if you just turn the little nodule to the backside, it puts the wheel at -1 degree camber. And then if you flip the bolt and put the arrow facing the outside, it's supposed to give you 1 extra degree. The camber bolts that I have do have the little nodules on the back so that you can turn it from inside and outside to get that camber, but the bolt itself seems a little bit skinnier and it allows me to have a little bit of play so I can have some adjustment in there. Adjusting camber on the front was definitely time consuming, having to pull the wheel off each time, having to loosen those bolts, make the adjustment, put the wheel back on, lower the car. From there, this is the tool that I was using. It's just a little right angle. And then what I would do is sit my level on the bottom down there to make sure everything was level. I just butted up against the bottom down there or the top, just depending on how much positive or negative camber you have. However far it was off, I just had to determine how much to adjust that camber bolt. Like I said already, huge pain in the butt. I probably took the front wheels, each one off about 10 times, but finally got it dialed in. Both of the front wheels do come with a little bit of factory negative camber, so that's kind of how I adjusted it. And then here's the passenger side over here also. For the rears, that is where I ran into my first problem. Your rear camber adjustment bolt is right here. So to make these adjustments, what you have to do is put 1 wrench on the other side, put 1 on this side, loosen it just a tad, and then rotate them both at the same time, and that will actually move this in and out to adjust your camber. The nut on the toe adjustment back there was very loose when I went to go take it off. It's very possible that this was what was actually causing the problem that I was having. You have to lift the car up every single time to get to the bolt and then drop it back down to make sure the wheels are on a level surface again. Just very, very time consuming. The camber and toe bolts on the rear are supposed to actually be adjusted at the same time, but I didn't do that. I did the camber first. Once I was able to get the camber locked in on all 4 wheels, I was able to work on the toe. Moving back up front, I did the front wheels first. Just loosen the lock nut that holds that in, and you can rotate the inner tie rod to push the wheel in or out. Again, lifting the car up to go underneath there and make the adjustments, and then having to drop it back down. Once the front toe was dialed in, I started working on the rear. The issue that I had with the front toe was every single time that I was lifting the car up, I did not realize that it was actually turning the steering wheel. When I dropped the car back down and I would take my measurements, nothing would change. It was very, very frustrating. Just happened to walk by and look in there, and I noticed the little Mitsubishi emblem was not straight up and down. I was pretty mad at myself for that one. After I got the toe dialed in on the rear, I did actually have to make a couple of more adjustments on the camber. If I had to do a full alignment again, I could probably knock it out in half the time. Everything is good to go now. Car is all lined up, so let's take this thing for a little spin. I have not driven the car in a couple of months, so one problem I'm having is my ethanol gauge is not reading anything. And then when I plugged my laptop in and did a data log, it's actually reading my ethanol percentage to be at 64%. When I was actually tuning, the ethanol percentage was at 79%. Second issue that I'm having is my 4-wheel drive and ASC system service required light is on. I'm not sure what could be causing that issue, but I did change the oil in the rear differential and the AYC. I feel like I did a pretty good job on my alignment. The wheel is just slightly off, but the car is tracking very, very straight. Give myself a little pat on the back. I don't know exactly what fixed it, but the issue that I was having is not happening anymore at all. Not only that, every turn that I make feels very responsive. It feels so much better. I guess it very well could have been those tie rod ends. The old ones were very loose, very floppy. Could have been the end links. Those things were pretty worn. They were pretty floppy. I also have a little bit of a suspicion that it was the rear back there. When I was adjusting the camber and the toe on the driver's side and the rear, both of those nuts were very loose. Everything feels good though. I can pretty much make little turns. I can pretty much take the wheel, go back and forth, and nothing feels out of place. Oh my gosh, I am so happy. This problem has been bugging me for so long. I'm so happy that I finally did something about it. It does suck that I don't know exactly what I did to fix it. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please smash that like button. If it helped you out in any way, hit that like button. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything else going on, and I will catch you guys next time.